In this video, we're going to go through the reasons why I think buying Warhammer models or other pre-built minis is a better way of collecting miniatures than 3D printing your own. Now, before you gather your pitchforks and torches, and just surround me, bombard the comments, destroy the like bar with all these dislikes, I think for too many of us, when we come to this debate, we have our own ideas, we get so tunnel vision and focused on our own arguments that we don't actually listen to the other side. So, I am pretty biased towards 3D printing. Like, I haven't bought any minis myself for a while. I've just been 3D printing them. So I just want to put that out there. No one is forcing me to say any of this. It's not like GW has my family holding me hostage with a gun to my head. Was that good? Like, can they go now? The first big reason I would equate to is convenience. When you buy pre-built minis, you don't have to spend all this time finding files, slicing them, arranging them on the build plate, setting up your 3D printing setup. You can order the models online, go into the shop and have them delivered the next day, pick them up, take them home and start assembling and painting them right away. Once the printer's going, you kind of just leave it, but you don't have to go through that whole process and then afterwards cleaning them up, disposing of the resin properly and that. And so from just a time convenience perspective, it's quite helpful just to buy minis. Another thing when it comes to convenience is the mess. Buying your own minis, you don't have to deal with liquid resin. You don't have to deal with spills or chemicals or anything like that. If you've seen any of my videos, you'll see that I spill resin as careful as I am. It just gets everywhere. You don't need to worry about wearing a mask or wearing gloves. The only thing you might get high off is your plastic glue. You don't have to worry about IPA and things like that. And so there is that level of convenience in just the process of assembling and painting your models once you just buy the model itself. Next, availability. Now, this might sound like a silly one, like availability, like you can get STLs online. That's as available as it gets. Hear me out. Warhammer, worldwide brand, you can probably find a store in your country. I haven't done the research to find out what countries they're not in. Most major cities will probably have a Games Workshop, or they're called Warhammer stores, aren't they? They're not game, like a Warhammer store. Maybe if you live in a remote area in your country, you might have to order it online and it'll take a couple of days or like a week or so to like get it delivered to you. But it's pretty available. Like, you can go get models very easily. For consumer 3D printers and parts, sometimes it can be a bit tricky. Some companies don't have dedicated stores. Like, I think Elegoo with Australia, it's through Amazon, and then there's like third-party stores that sell Elegoo, but its main, I think, store is through Amazon. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's where I've just been trying to find the Saturn II, because that's kind of what I want for Christmas. You're watching, honey, please. And just with stuff going around the world, getting things from different parts of the world can be quite tricky. And so when you're just buying a completed product, it is quite accessible and available. And so buying Games Workshop's models or any other pre-built, assembled, printed, whatever you want to call them, they're quite accessible in that because you don't have to source different parts and get them all to arrive. And in terms of availability also, if there is a problem with your 3D printer and the company is overseas and the manufacturer is overseas, like having to deal with warranty and stuff like that could be a little trickier. If you have to deal with like shipping it overseas, waiting for it to come back, you could be waiting weeks and stuff. And so that comes to my next point, which is customer service. I've only experienced, like, I only have 2 patrons that I follow, One Page Rules and Puppets War. Free shout out to them, even though this video will get like 100 views. There are some Patreons and 3D printed files that you even spend money on that are pre-supported and that are bad. One guy, Once in a Six Side, another fellow Aussie, give you a shout out. He reviews Patreons and he goes through UV tools to find where the islands are, and sometimes like people pre-support their models but they still fail because they haven't done it properly. And that's the problem sometimes with 3D printed files, whereas you're buying pre-built minis, most of the time I assume the sprues and all that are going to be good. If there's a problem, I know Games Workshop, even though I haven't had the experience, but what I've seen online, so just take that with a grain of salt, is that they're pretty good with giving you an extra, like the missing pieces. And I've heard stories where it's just like one piece was missing, so they just send them a whole new box. So maybe I should say pieces were missed. Anyway, the customer service is going to be there. Or if you're dealing with 3D printed files, like what kind of customer service do you have to the Patreon and stuff like that? I don't know because I've never had complaints with them, but I feel like with those smaller creators and things like that, it's going to be harder to follow up, harder to push through. Patreon's probably got some clauses and stuff like that, but I just feel like it's going to be a lot of a hassle. Whereas if it's like Atomic Mass Miniatures or GW, like you're going to be able to follow them up with customer service quite easily. Another reason, which might sound controversial, is value. Say you want to get started into the miniature wargaming painting hobby, you could buy like a box, like this is going to be an AUD, but you could probably buy a squad for like $50, $60, buy some paints, buy like a brush and like some small hobby tools so you can assemble the models, some plastic glue and stuff. Like maybe I'll do the math on the screen over here, probably not because I'm a bit lazy, but that is going to be cheaper than buying your own 3D printing setup. And I get people might argue in the long run it's going to save you money, but if you're just starting out, you could spend a couple of like $150, start assembling your first squad, realize you hate it. Whereas if you do that with a 3D printing setup, you're going to fork out maybe a couple of $100, $300 or something like that, and then find out you hate it. Like that's going to suck. But in terms of value, those pre-built miniatures like GW and stuff like that, they retain their value quite well. You might be able to sell your assembled primed minis, or even if they're in the box still, for like, I don't know, I'm gonna throw out a number, like 50 to 70% of their recommended retail value, depending on the condition and the demand. I've actually made some money, like when I was trying to assemble a Tau army, just because Tau got a new codex, and I bought stuff for $100, and then I sold parts of that off for $85, and so I paid about $15 for 3 crisis suits, which is like, I don't know, they're like 50, 60 Australian or something for a squad. Probably even more than that. Whereas a lot of the time with 3D printed miniatures, like the license for them is only for your personal use. I'm not a lawyer. Maybe you could argue if it's a painted 3D printed army, you could be selling it for the work you've spent painting. But a lot of the time I've checked the license for one-page rules on My Mini Factory, and it says receiving any reimbursements or funds like that associated with the miniatures that you printed, so that they're only for your personal use. I'm pretty sure that means you can give models away for free. And the other thing is, I think people might argue differently. If someone gave you the files and you offered your printer as a service, you could print them and charge them for the 3D printing service and then delete the files after. I think you could do that because people might buy files, but their printer doesn't work, or they don't have a big enough printer to print something, and they can like pay someone to supply those 3D printed services. Not sure, not a lawyer, but you can't resell your model. So if you want to get out of the hobby, having Games Workshop or other models, like you can sell them pretty easily, go online on Facebook and stuff like that. Whereas if you're trying to sell your 3D printing setup, like your printer,
gonna have a bad time,
leftover resin and stuff like that, it's going to be a lot harder to exit the hobby. So there is that value in that, which is maybe something people don't think about. Who knows? Just going back to reselling your printer, I don't know how comfortable I would be buying a secondhand 3D printer if I didn't know the person. Now, here come to the really lame reasons that just kind of chuck them in at the end. One is gaming. So if you want to participate in official Warhammer tournaments, you need to have official Games Workshop models. Like you can do conversions and stuff like that, and I think you can do 3D printed parts, but they have to be designed by yourself. You can't 3D print accessories that you've bought online to add to your army if you want to participate in their tournaments. I don't know how much they enforce that, or how much they can tell or argue like, hey, this 3D printed part, like you didn't design it. I know that's from so-and-so's Patreon. Don't know, but it's one of those things that you want to do. The other thing also is if you're using proxies for like those kind of tournaments, you need to get the right size. So that can be a little tricky. Whereas if you just buy the models, they come with the right base size, they come with the right model height as well. One of the things that they do though, but which makes sense, like they slowly change stuff over time. So for me, my Orc boys used to be on 25mm base, now they're on 32s. That was the biggest pain in the butt to change them all to 25s. They were unpainted, and so like at the time it was terrible. But now that it's done, it's fine. And I think I sold like 25 boys or something. Just because it's like, I'm never going to play a big game and I just don't need it. You just want to get into 3D printing, just sell all your Games Workshop stuff and just print everything else, and you trade your time for money. But then you're a better painter, you can paint the miniatures better. Okay, this is another, I don't know, little edgy reason that I don't think is that great, but that is painting guide. It is a lot easier to find a painting guide for an established physical model. Like something with GW models, you could probably Google, I don't know, Tau broadside guide for them. Whereas when you're using proxies, like you probably get a similar idea, but it's not a one-for-one painting guide. And so like just from that kind of convenience, it's a small reason. Like I know I'm digging from the bottom of the barrel now. And then the last reason that I would equate to is health and safety, which we already alluded to into the convenience. I remember the first week when I had my printer, I got headaches from the resin fumes, and it's in my garage. It's a pretty big space. I had the doors open, but I just didn't wear my respirator. and I went to work just like with a headache, and it was really annoying. And to top it off, like getting resin, like even if you wear gloves and stuff, resin just gets everywhere. Like you accidentally touch a tool and there's resin on your fingers, you really got to wash it off and stuff. You don't want to have it on and then go out into the sun and then it cures and burns you. You got to deal with IPA. IPA also smells, and I know you can use different cleaning solutions, but I'm just saying this is from my experience. And so you got to deal with all that mess, the safety, like resin isn't safe. You have to dispose of it properly. Like there's just some extra stuff. One of the big things in the buying pre-built models to 3D printing is it's kind of the verse of like cost benefit, whereas there's a bit more stuff to do in 3D printing, but there's some versatility, but you give up your time. And so if you've enjoyed my ramblings and the new video on why 3D printing is better than buying GW has come out, you can watch it over here, or if it hasn't, you can watch another hobby related video over here. Thank you for watching and happy hobbying.